Friends, there she was, a young woman lying helplessly before me, her face pale and devoid of life. In that moment, my instinct was to ensure she was buried immediately, to save her from further indignity. But after a brief silence filled with shock and uncertainty, we decided to call a doctor first, hoping to understand what had truly happened to her. That day, something extraordinary unfolded. Strangers from far and wide, people who had never stepped foot in our place before, arrived in droves. They weren't here out of mere curiosity. They came because of the mysterious sounds emanating from her body, sounds that resembled a sacred prayer. It was unlike anything we had ever experienced, leaving us stunned and speechless. I knew her well. We had once worked together. Yet the situation attracted far more attention than just those who knew her personally. People weren't merely drawn to the inexplicable phenomenon. They came to reconcile it with who she was, or at least who they believed her to be. A woman with a tainted reputation, now the source of something so divine. I suggested we go forward with the burial, but others vehemently objected. No, they said, we need to uncover the truth first. What began as hushed deliberations quickly escalated, leading to the decision to conduct an autopsy. When the doctor finally revealed his findings, something truly remarkable occurred. He fell to his knees, tears streaming down his face, overcome by the weight of what he had discovered. Those around him followed suit, their eyes wet with emotion, their breaths caught in their throats. Friends, the story behind this moment is one you cannot miss. Stay with us until the end, and don't forget to like this video. If you're new here, subscribe to our channel and hit the bell icon for updates. Now, let's unravel the mystery. Her name was Sarah, a young woman whose life was filled with heartbreak and sacrifice. She had left her family behind to come here, though not by choice. She bore the weight of her family's expectations, particularly for her younger brothers. Her parents, who lived in a modest rural community, pinned all their hopes on Sarah's ability to provide for the education of her 4 younger siblings. As the eldest, she carried their dreams on her shoulders, dreams that came at a devastating cost. Driven by societal norms and their own desperation, her parents made a decision that would shatter her life forever. They sold their daughter to a brothel. When the brothel's madam questioned them, asking, "Is this really your child?" they answered without hesitation, "Yes, she is ours." Their request was as cold as it was calculated. "Send us her earnings every month to this account. It will pay for her brother's education." As they walked away, Sarah's heart-wrenching cries echoed through the air. "Mother, please, don't leave me here," she screamed, her voice raw with fear and anguish. "This place is a nightmare. How can you abandon me like this? I feel like I'm dying while still alive." But her words fell on deaf ears. Her parents didn't turn back, not even once, as they disappeared into the distance, their hearts seemingly hardened by their decision, or perhaps too ashamed to face what they had done. At first, it was hard to believe her story. How could parents betray their own child so cruelly? But we had seen such things before. In this line of work, even the unthinkable becomes commonplace. Still, selling a beautiful, innocent girl like Sarah into this life felt especially incomprehensible. Her beauty, which could have been a blessing, had instead become a curse, commodified and exploited by those who saw her as nothing more than a means to an end. Sarah refused to eat for days, her spirit crushed by the betrayal and the horror of her new reality. She even tried to end her own life, but in places like this, even that desperate escape is denied. The madam made sure of it, saying, "A face like hers is too valuable to waste." Over time, the relentless torment broke her spirit. Sarah surrendered to the demands of the brothel, not out of choice, but as a means of survival. Yet society, with its sharp tongue and shallow judgments, would later condemn her. If she were truly a good girl, she would have taken her own life, they would say. But who are we to dictate how someone survives? Suicide is no simple act, especially for someone so young, burdened by fear and stripped of hope. Even those who consider it often find themselves paralyzed, caught between despair and the faintest glimmer of life. One day, Sarah looked at herself in the mirror and said, "This name is too sacred for someone like me. Don't call me Sarah anymore." The madam, sensing an opportunity to erase Sarah's former identity, renamed her Rachel. From that moment on, Rachel was who she became, a new name to mask her old life. The news of Rachel's arrival spread quickly, drawing wealthy and high-profile clients eager to exploit her youth and beauty. Rachel, however, no longer fought back. She sat quietly, resigned to her fate. I couldn't bear to watch her suffer. Her story mirrored my own in so many painful ways, but I believed she still had a chance, a small window of hope to escape. One evening, as she sat in silence, I whispered to her, "You don't have to stay here. There's still time for you to leave." That night, I brought her to my room, and together we began to plan her escape, knowing the risks but clinging to the hope that she could reclaim her life. I told her to come with me, pretending I wanted to help her apply makeup properly, but my real intention was to show her the way out. "This is your chance, Sarah," I whispered. "Run away from here before it's too late. This place will destroy you. Your life will turn into a living hell." Outside, I could hear the others laughing and bargaining, each offering a price to exploit her, as if she were a mere object to be traded. "Go, Sarah," I urged. "Go anywhere, far away. Just leave this place." She looked at me, her eyes hollow and filled with despair. "Go where?" she asked, her voice trembling. "My own parents abandoned me. Where would I even go? No matter where I end up, it will be the same. At least here, I know what to expect. Out there, I don't even know how much worse it could be. What if it's worse than this?" Her words stung. "You don't understand," I pleaded. "You don't know how cruel this place is." She replied, her tone calm but bitter. "I know exactly how cruel it is, but it's still not as cruel as the place where I was raised, the place where I spent years being groomed only to be sold for the sake of my brother's education. To my parents, I'm worth nothing." Her words struck me deeply. She wasn't lying. No one had ever considered Sarah's life, her dreams, or her pain. "Did you know," she said softly, "I'm good at tailoring? I could have made a living sewing, but my mother said it was pointless. No one in our village pays more than a few coins for sewing. My parents said that if they sent me here, I could earn thousands a day." My father hesitated. He didn't want to send me to this specific brothel because it didn't pay as much as others. But my mother insisted. She wanted me to go to the city brothel where she believed I'd make more money. Can you imagine hearing that from your own parents? Tell me, who would want to live after hearing such things? Do you think I'm alive? I've been dead inside for a long time. Tears streamed down her face as she spoke, and I couldn't hold back my own. I had heard countless heartbreaking stories in this place, but Sarah's was the most harrowing. Her parents had abandoned her, leaving her to endure unspeakable horrors every single day. Whenever I saw her, she was crying, sometimes silently, sometimes so loudly that it echoed through the walls. I once asked her, "Why do you keep punishing yourself like this? You've already accepted your fate. Why cry so much?" She looked at me, her face soaked with tears, and said, "I don't know why. Maybe I cry because of what happens to me here every day, or maybe because my own parents put me in this situation to begin with." Sarah's tears were endless. For a month and a half, she barely ate enough to survive. Her fragile frame grew weaker by the day. One afternoon, the madam noticed. "She's losing her beauty," she said coldly. "Her eyes are sunken, and she looks frail. If we don't take care of her, she won't bring in the kind of money we need. Feed her well. Give her mutton stew or something. Make sure she gains weight and looks presentable." Her words reminded me of how farmers fatten animals before sending them to market. It was the same with us. People often asked, "Why don't you just leave this life behind?" But they never understood the chains that bound us here. Sarah was earning money for her brothers. I was here for my 2 children, whom I had left with my sister, hoping to keep them away from the shadows of this place. Others were here to support aging parents or simply because they had nowhere else to go. None of us were here by choice, but leaving wasn't an option. Our circumstances didn't allow it. One day, I confided in the madam. "Sister, I'm worried about Sarah. She's not doing well. I think she might try to take her own life if this continues." The madam waved me off. "She won't. Those who truly want to commit suicide don't cry like she does. She doesn't have the courage for it." Sarah stayed in my room most nights. We were always busy, but we tried to catch some sleep during the day. Even then, Sarah cried. Her sobs filled the air, and at first I felt immense sorrow for her. But after a while, her constant weeping began to wear on me. One day, I snapped. "Sarah, stop crying. You've accepted this life, haven't you? Crying won't change anything. This world is cruel, and everyone here is using someone else for their own gain. Even parents can be selfish. Sons are celebrated and expected to support their families. Daughters, on the other hand, are burdened with expectations and discarded when they're no longer useful. It's the way of the world. When you realize that, you'll understand there's no point in crying." Sarah looked at me with red, swollen eyes and said softly, "One day, I'll stop crying, but that day, I'll put an end to everything." "All this suffering," Sarah whispered one evening, "it won't last much longer." I could sense the weight of her words, though I didn't yet understand their full meaning. Then, one day, I learned something unexpected, something that could have changed her life forever. A wealthy regular at the brothel, a man named Mr. Salam, had fallen in love with Sarah. Despite his affluence and having a wife back home, his marriage was childless, and he was utterly captivated by Sarah, so much so that he wanted to marry her and take her away from this wretched place. The man was serious about his intentions. He approached the madam, offering a sum of money so substantial that even she, a woman driven solely by profit, was tempted to agree. "With this amount," she confided, "I could retire and live comfortably for the rest of my life. What need do I have to keep her here? Besides, in a few years, she'll no longer fetch the same earnings." Reluctantly, the madam told Mr. Salim, "If she's willing to go with you, you can take her, but I won't force her. The choice is hers." Mr. Salim, however, was adamant. "I don't want her as some passing fancy," he said. "I want to marry her, to give her the respect and status of my wife." For a moment, I felt a spark of hope for Sarah. A chance like this was a rarity in a world where clients came to exploit, not to save. But when I told her about Mr. Salim's offer, her reaction left me in disbelief. "I won't go with him," she said flatly, her tone resolute. It was as if the ground beneath my feet had vanished. "What are you saying?" I exclaimed. "You cry day and night, begging for a way out, and now that fate is handing you this golden opportunity, you're refusing it? Do you know how rare men like Mr. Salim are? No one comes here offering marriage, offering freedom. This is your chance, Sarah. Take it before it's too late." Her expression didn't waver. "You're right," she said quietly. "No one comes to a brothel to marry someone like me, but even if I leave this place, my fate won't change. A prostitute's destiny isn't rewritten by a change of location. I've become a curse in this world, a character society will never respect. No matter where I go, I'll always carry the same label. I don't want to go with him. I've made up my mind." I stared at her, stunned. "What do you mean you've made up your mind? What are you planning to do? If you're not going with him, what other option do you have?" She looked at me with a calm determination that unsettled me. "You'll see," she said cryptically. "I know my end won't be like this. I'll change my outcome, no matter what my story has been." Her words lingered in my mind, haunting me. Could someone like Sarah truly change her destiny? Prostitution is a prison, one where the walls are built from the very prejudices and cruelties of the world outside. One morning, I found her awake earlier than usual. Her routine had been disrupted for weeks, and so had mine. "What are you thinking about?" I asked her, noting the unusual calmness in her demeanor. "Today, there are no tears in your eyes." She glanced at me with a faint smile. "There are no tears because I've made my decision," she said. "You'll find out soon enough. Don't worry, you're my friend. You'll be the first to know." I sighed, exasperated. What's the use of being your friend when you never listen? I've tried so many times to make you see reason, to help you make the best choices for yourself, but you always refuse. "For whom should I make those choices?" she replied. "My parents? The ones who sent me here to begin with?" She paused, her voice softening. "I loved my parents more than life itself. I obeyed them in everything. But after my brothers were born, I became nothing to them. I was reduced to a caretaker, responsible for all their needs. And when it came time to fund their education, they sold me like livestock. Do you know how many nights I went to bed hungry because my share of the food was given to my brothers? How many toys I gave up because they thought I didn't need them? I accepted it all, believing it was my duty as their older sister. But I never thought they would ask me to sacrifice my entire life for their future. And now, I have nothing left to give. The depth of her pain was indescribable. I remember the day her parents came to the brothel, not to see her, but to collect the money the madam owed them. 3 months of earnings, unpaid. They needed the money for her brother's schooling. When Sarah saw them, she didn't move. She didn't embrace them or even greet them. She stood by a pillar, gripping it tightly, her face blank with suppressed emotion. "How are you?" they asked. "I'm alive," she replied curtly, offering nothing more. They sat outside, waiting for their money, speaking little as though the weight of their actions hung in the air between them. After the madam handed over the money, they turned to leave. "Your brothers are doing well," her father said. "Omar came first in his class. They're all progressing in school." Sarah nodded. "May God make them good people," she said. "And when they grow up, don't forget to tell them the story of how their only sister paid for their education with her life." Her words, though spoken calmly, cut like a blade. Her parents' faces fell, their smiles vanishing in an instant. Her mother turned sharply, snapping, "Enough! Let's go!" They left in silence, their departure as hollow as their visit. When they were gone, Sarah collapsed to the ground, sobbing uncontrollably. The sight of her parents had broken something inside her, a reminder of all she had lost, all she had endured, and all she would never reclaim. That day, I felt something in Sarah had irreparably broken, as if her soul had finally surrendered. She had been unusually quiet for 2 days, not leaving her room even once. Morning turned into afternoon, and as evening approached, the house stirred with activity. The other girls were busy preparing for their night, putting on makeup and getting ready for the usual routine, but Sarah's door remained shut. A strange unease settled over me, so I decided to check on her. I opened the door and froze in my tracks. There she was, lying perfectly still. A chill ran through me as I called out her name, shaking her shoulders gently, then more urgently. There was no response. Her body was lifeless, and I could see in her face that she had already left this world. My voice broke as I screamed for the others, and soon the room was filled with people, all staring in stunned silence. Then something extraordinary happened. As we stood there, the sound of the adhan, the Islamic call to prayer, filled the air. It was clear and resonant, as though it were being called from a mosque nearby. But that was impossible. There was no mosque anywhere near this place, and even if there were, who would build one in such an impure area? Everyone in the room looked at each other in confusion. We didn't have mobile phones with adhan ringtones, and no one here would have set an alarm with such a sound. The call to prayer continued for a moment, then faded away. An hour later, the adhan began again. This time, the room fell into a hushed awe. The sound wasn't coming from outside, it was coming from within the room, from Sarah's body. At first, I thought I was imagining things, but as it repeated every hour, everyone was forced to believe it. The event quickly became the talk of the neighborhood. People who once avoided our brothel, as though it were cursed, began to gather outside, desperate to witness the phenomenon for themselves. Rumors spread like wildfire. Some whispered that Sarah must have been a deeply pious woman wronged by circumstances. Others speculated that her suffering had sanctified her, turning her into a vessel of divine intervention. Many were skeptical, calling it a lie, but when they heard the adhan with their own ears, even the most doubtful were left speechless. I called Sarah's family to inform them of her passing. Their response was as cold as I had feared. "She's dead? Oh, what a loss," her father said. "We'll come soon." They hung up without a word of sorrow or regret. When they arrived, they showed no signs of grief. It was as if they were visiting to collect an item they had misplaced, not mourning the daughter they had cast aside. I began to wonder if they were her real parents at all. Could people truly be so heartless toward their own child? But Sarah did resemble her mother, and I had to accept the painful truth. Her parents had sold her to fund their son's education, seeing her as nothing more than a means to an end. Their indifference cut deeply. When her parents arrived and saw her lifeless body, they asked curtly, "How are your brothers doing?" Sarah's mother replied with a faint smile, "They're fine. Omar even came first in his class. They're all studying well." Sarah's voice was calm but bitter as she responded, "May God make them good people, and when they succeed in life, Don't forget to tell them the story of how their sister paid for their education with her own life. Her words, though delivered without malice, struck like lightning. Her parents' smiles faded instantly. Enough, her mother snapped. Let's leave. They walked out without so much as a backward glance, leaving me to wonder how such parents could exist. The crowd outside grew larger as word spread about the Adhan. Even an imam arrived, furious at the spectacle. What nonsense is this? Are you trying to create a new way to gather crowds? He demanded. But when he heard the Adhan himself, his anger dissolved into astonishment. He began reciting prayers, visibly moved by what he had witnessed. A soft light seemed to radiate from Sarah's face, and for the first time, she looked peaceful, almost as though she were smiling. It was a sight I had never seen in her life. Sarah had always been crying or lost in despair, but now, in death, she seemed to have found a sense of tranquility. Eventually, a forensic doctor named Dr. Ahmed was called to conduct an autopsy. I begged to stay by his side, unable to bear the thought of leaving Sarah alone. He allowed me to remain, and as he worked, I turned away, unable to watch. Suddenly, I heard him sobbing. When I turned back, I saw Dr. Ahmed on the floor, prostrating himself in prayer. Tears streamed down his face. "What's wrong, doctor?" I asked, my voice trembling. He looked at me, his expression filled with sorrow. "This girl endured unimaginable pain," he said. "Yet there is nothing inside her body, nothing that could have produced the sound of the Adhan. This is a miracle, one I cannot explain." He wiped his eyes and prayed for Sarah's soul before preparing her body for burial. As we laid Sarah to rest, the Adhan continued to echo, a reminder of her suffering, her resilience, and the unshakable strength of her spirit. In life, she had been wronged by everyone she trusted, but in death, she became a symbol of something far greater, a testament to the fact that even in the darkest places, light can still find a way to shine. Everyone remembered Sarah with kindness and reverence. Her grave became a place of quiet reflection, a spot where people came to pay their respects. Some recited prayers from the Quran, such as Surah Al-Fatiha, while others left flowers or lit candles in her memory. No one called her a prostitute anymore. Her grave was no longer the resting place of a woman from the brothel. It became known as the grave of the woman from whose body the Adhan had miraculously echoed after her death. People spoke of her with awe and compassion, saying, "She is no longer of this world, but she must have been a deeply pious woman." One day I found myself sitting alone by Sarah's grave, her words echoing in my mind. "No matter what my history is, my end will be different." In her own way, she had been right. Her story, so marked by suffering and injustice, had indeed changed after her death. But I carried a secret that no one else knew. During the autopsy, we had discovered a device hidden within her, a device she had received from one of her wealthy clients. It was programmed to play the Adhan, set like an alarm. Sarah had removed it from its casing and left it active inside her before ending her own life. The world had treated her so cruelly that even in her final act, she sought a way to rewrite her legacy, to demand respect from a society that had stripped her of dignity in life. I begged Dr. Ahmed not to reveal this discovery, knowing Sarah's intent had been deliberate. She had known what the device would do and the impact it would have. She told me once, in her quiet and reflective way, that the very thing causing the sound would also be the reason for her death. It was her choice, a calculated and defiant decision to reclaim some measure of honor, even if it came only in death. But this raises a profound question. If someone is treated so unjustly, can we blame them for making such a decision about their own life? Should society not bear the weight of that blame? Sarah's story is a reflection of how our world continues to value brothers over sisters, reinforcing inequalities that begin in childhood. It may seem like an old practice, but it's not as distant as we'd like to believe. When parents prioritize the needs of their sons over their daughters, when food is saved for the boy while the girl is given less, discrimination begins in the smallest of ways. Sarah's story stands as a haunting testament to this injustice. She was sent to a brothel to fund her brother's education, her life reduced to a sacrifice for others' futures. Yet today she is no longer remembered as a mere victim. I don't think of her as Rashma, the name she was given in the brothel. To me, she is Sarah, her real name, the name she deserved to carry with dignity. That is the name we inscribed on her gravestone, a small but meaningful gesture to honor who she truly was. If Sarah's story moved you, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more stories that educate and inspire. Thank you for staying with us through this journey. We'll see you in the next video. Until then, take care, and may peace be upon you. Not long after Sarah's passing, her grave became a place of solace for those seeking comfort. But for me, it became a source of unending guilt and unanswered questions. I often found myself sitting by her gravestone, whispering to the wind, wondering if I could have done more. Could I have saved her? Could I have convinced her to seize the chance for freedom when it was within her grasp? The weight of those questions bore down on me, and the pain of her loss never eased. Then, one fateful day, I received a letter. It was addressed to me, but the handwriting on the envelope sent a chill down my spine. It was Sarah's. My hands trembled as I opened it, the letter dated just days before her death. The words she had written revealed the depths of her despair and the clarity of her decision. She wrote, "My dear friend, I know you've tried to save me more times than I can count. I see the kindness in your eyes and feel the warmth of your heart, but please don't blame yourself for what is about to happen. I have chosen this path because I no longer see a way out. Every breath I take in this place feels like a betrayal of who I once was. I cannot bear to live a life where I am nothing more than a vessel for others to use. I cannot bear to face a world that sees me as unworthy of respect, unworthy of love. This decision is mine, and mine alone. Forgive me for the pain I know this will cause you. When you think of me, please remember me as Sarah, not as Rashma. In my heart, I've always been Sarah." Her words pierced my soul, leaving me reeling with grief. For days, I couldn't bring myself to speak, eat, or even step outside. I clutched that letter like it was a part of her, reading it over and over, searching for answers in her pain. But the answers never came, only more questions. In the weeks that followed, Sarah's parents returned to the brothel. This time, they didn't come for money. They came with demands. "We want to move her body," her father said coldly. "We'll bury her in our family plot." I stared at them, disbelief coursing through me. "Why now?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Why do you care about her now when you didn't care about her in life?" Her mother looked at me with irritation, as if my question had offended her. "She's still our daughter," she snapped. "We don't need to explain ourselves to you." Their words enraged me, but I held my tongue. Instead, I pointed to Sarah's grave and said, "That's her resting place. She's at peace here, and she will not be moved." They left in anger, muttering under their breaths, but their visit left me shaken. I knew they didn't want to honor Sarah. They wanted to erase her, to bury her far from the prying eyes of strangers, to rewrite her story in a way that absolved them of their guilt. As time passed, I began to notice strange occurrences at the brothel. Whispers of Sarah's name echoed in the hallways at night, and faint sounds of the adhan could sometimes be heard, though no device or explanation could be found. Some of the girls said they felt her presence, a comforting warmth in moments of despair. Others claimed to have seen her in their dreams, standing tall and unbroken, her face serene. But not all the whispers were kind. Rumors spread that Sarah's death had cursed the brothel. Clients began to dwindle, and the madam grew increasingly agitated. "She's haunting this place," she said one night, her voice low and fearful. "Her death has brought bad luck to all of us." One evening, a fire broke out in the brothel. It started in Sarah's old room, though no one could explain how. The flames consumed the building rapidly, forcing us all to flee into the streets. As I stood outside, watching the place I had called home burn to the ground, I couldn't help but feel a strange sense of liberation. It was as if Sarah's spirit had finally broken free, taking the brothel with her. In the aftermath of the fire, the girls scattered, finding refuge wherever they could. I stayed in the city, working odd jobs and visiting Sarah's grave whenever I could. Her story had become a part of me, a constant reminder of the injustice that still pervades our world. One day, I met a woman at Sarah's grave. She was older, dressed modestly, with a face marked by sorrow. "Did you know her?" she asked, her voice trembling. "She was my sister," I replied, "though not by blood." The woman nodded, her eyes filling with tears. "I was once like her," she said. I escaped, but the scars never left me. Her words stayed with me long after she walked away, reminding me that Sarah's story was not unique. It was the story of countless women, forgotten by society but deserving of so much more. As I stood by her grave that evening, I whispered, "You were right, Sarah. Your end was different. You changed your story. And now, I'll spend the rest of my life making sure the world remembers you. Not as Rashma, but as Sarah." The story of Sarah resonates deeply with the challenges we face in life, reminding us that even in the darkest moments, our choices and resilience can define us. Her journey, though marked by pain and injustice, teaches the profound lesson that our circumstances do not determine our worth and that the fight for dignity is never in vain. In my current life, I see reflections of Sarah's struggles in the expectations society places on us. Whether it's the constant pressure to meet certain standards, the silent battles we fight to be valued for who we truly are, or the sacrifices we're asked to make for others at the expense of our own happiness. Sarah's story pushes me to question my own choices and priorities. Am I allowing others to dictate my value? Am I living authentically or merely surviving under the weight of expectations? Her unwavering determination, even in the face of insurmountable odds, reminds me that I have the power to redefine my path, no matter how difficult the circumstances may seem. Her decision to reclaim her narrative, even through an act of finality, shows the immense strength it takes to demand respect in a world that often withholds it from those who deserve it most. For you, my advice is to reflect on Sarah's courage and apply it to your own life. Don't allow the judgments or limitations imposed by others to dictate your destiny. Take ownership of your story, even when it feels like the odds are stacked against you. Stand firm in your values, and don't shy away from making choices that honor your sense of self-worth. Be kind to yourself, and remember that you deserve love, respect, and a chance to thrive, not just survive. Sarah's story also serves as a powerful reminder of the importance of compassion. In our daily lives, we encounter people who may be fighting silent battles, carrying burdens we cannot see. Let her story inspire you to extend kindness and understanding, even when it feels inconvenient. Sometimes the smallest acts of empathy can be life-changing for someone in need. Finally, let Sarah's story remind you to create space for those who feel unseen or unheard. Use your voice to advocate for fairness and equality, whether it's within your family, your community, or on a larger scale. If we each take small steps to challenge the societal norms that perpetuate inequality and suffering, we can begin to build a world where stories like Sarah's become relics of the past rather than reflections of the present. Thank you for watching. If you have any comments, please comment below the video. Please subscribe to the channel to support us.